My guests today are Mary Sue Milliken and Susan Feniger, acclaimed chefs and entrepreneurs who have revolutionized the culinary scene. Meeting in 1978, they together broke into the industry with City Café and City Restaurant, which shortly turned into Border Grill. Over the next 4 decades, Susan and Mary Sue built a restaurant empire across LA and Las Vegas with SOCALO, Alice B, BBQ Mexicana, Pacha Mamas, and more. What stood out in their 4-decade-long partnership is not just their culinary expertise, but also their commitment to innovation, sustainability, and community engagement. James Beard Award and Julia Child Award recipients, TV stars, and cookbook authors, they support various causes from LGBTQ rights, food policy, and diplomacy. I am thrilled to welcome Mary Sue and Susan, my first business partners featured in Atlanta Diaries. Their story is a testament to the power of collaboration, perseverance, and passion. Without further ado, let's delve into their remarkable journey and celebrate their extraordinary achievements. A very warm welcome, Mary Sue and Susan.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I was wondering about who you were talking about.
That's the best part. Your passion and humility come through in every meeting. So thank you again.
Sure.
So before we delve into your early years, I do want to explore what was the turning point or catalyst that led to the formation of this partnership spanning 4 decades.
I'm going to say it's 2 bottles of wine.
And a rainbow. But I'll say that when I first met Susan, I'd already graduated from chef school. She'd already graduated. We were the first 2 women working side by side in a very staunch French, very classical kind of brigade in a restaurant in Chicago. And I'd had jobs at, other fancy French restaurants and hotels. But it was the first time I met someone who had the same passion and work ethic and approach to the apprenticeship as I had. And it was really refreshing. And it was an immediate connection for us, I think, in that first kitchen.
And who took the initiative? Who sort of talked about it? Okay, let's work together.
Oh, you mean many years later?
That would be Susan, I would say. She's very much at the forefront of initiating new projects and new things for us. And she was the one who said, come on out to California. I've got this opportunity and I'll make it super easy for you. I'm moving out of my apartment. You can have my apartment. And of course, that all worked out. But I have to say, a year before that, or maybe only about 6 or 7 months before that, we were in an apartment in Paris and we'd been working together and we were cooking together and just doing kind of stages around Paris because we were both getting ready to go back to the States. And we did have a bottle of wine in my apartment and there was a rainbow and we had a second bottle of wine. And that's when we decided we would be business partners someday. We were broke. We didn't have a penny. We had no idea how to start a business or where.
We kept looking at should we do Dallas? Should we do New York? Should we do, Chicago, LA? And then, of course, neither one of us had money. So I went back to LA. She went back to Chicago. And so it was really, sort of a pipe dream in some ways. But I think we thought it would be real, but it wasn't with any structure or real planning at that time because it wasn't like we had anything put away.
So Susan, then looks like it was very impulsive. It was just something where you knew that she's the right partner for you.
Yeah. When I was in culinary school, then working in restaurants after that, there weren't very many women in our field working in sort of what at that time were big name, important restaurants. And so, I think when Mary Sue and I connected, we did feel like we were working harder than any of the men in the kitchen. And I think we were hungry to learn as much as we could. And I'd been an Ayn Rand reader and follower from the time I was in high school. Not that I am now. I always have to say that. But at the time, I was very driven and was very drawn to powerful women. My father was entrepreneurial. I didn't feel like there was anything we couldn't do. So not having money didn't really matter. And eventually, which was pretty quick, I met these two women that owned an optical shop, LAI Works, and they had this sort of dream of doing a little espresso bar next door to their store. So when I went to help them, they had a hot plate, put a dish on the menu because they were serving espressos, and it was a cool little place, and started doing daytime at Mommy's Own, nighttime there, doing some things. And then I reached out to Milliken and said, there's this great little kitchen. You should come see it. We both had been working in 2- and 3-star restaurants in France. Come out, just visit and sort of see what we can do. So Mary Sue came out for a visit, and there was one hot plate.
It literally took 2 hours for a pot of water to boil. 2 hours.
And we put a special on, one night. And I think it was like our first special, which was from this restaurant, the Perroquet in Chicago, which was veal tongue with lobster sauce and sauteed pears in this little cafe that was like serving espresso and,
salami sandwiches.
So at this point in time, it sounds like a lot of fun, excitement, adventure, right? But when were you sort of proactive about ensuring that your partnership stays as beautiful as it is even now?
I had to get Mary Sue to move out. I guess I convinced her, or something convinced her, to move back out and let's run this little kitchen. And I moved out of my apartment in with my girlfriend, and she took over my apartment. So it was sort of an easy transition.
Very easy. When you say, when did it become intentional? Yeah. That's a really interesting question, because I think we have spent the last 40 years being quite reactive to things, very much like someone throws a ball at us like, hey, you want to have a radio show about food? And we didn't think, oh, let's go get a radio show.
Right.
But we just, jumped at the chance. So in a lot of ways, I think the fact that we had talent, we had personality, we have, a bond to each other, we finish each other's sentences. So these things kept coming towards us. Why don't you write a book? You want to do a consulting job in New York for a comedy club? So we have been quite reactive and less, I would say, less intentional than people might think.
Yeah.
But I think to ensure that our partnership was cohesive, we had to focus on making sure we each were getting what we needed and not growing apart. Or actually, I should say, we're growing apart in a way that was acceptable for both of us. I think partnerships are tricky. Marriages are tricky. I think any long-term relationship has its hills and valleys, and ours is no different.
One thing that's really interesting about it, I think over the years, like Mary Sue was saying, is that, initially, no matter what we did, it was like we would make every decision about everything together. And over the years, I think we have learned about how to allow each one of us to pursue our dreams, which, in many ways were parallel paths, but different, with different intentions. But I do think that part of what has been rewarding for us both is to follow the things that we're most passionate about. And those have not necessarily been about growing our business. And accidentally, it has grown our business, but in ways that are not like opening up 25 restaurants, but it is doing 6 cookbooks. It is working in the nonprofit world that we're both very passionate about. Some of the things are together and some of the things are our separate passions. But I think allowing each one to grow has been the strength of our partnership.
So in a sense, giving each other their space.
Absolutely. But I would also add that in the beginning, the foundation was built so solidly because we were very loyal to each other. So if we got a call from a TV show that said, we want one of you to come on and do something, we would say, no, it's both of us or none of us.
Yeah.
And we were very, very solid about that, to a point of probably being restrictive, but it gave us a foundation of trust. And there wasn't a crack in there to say, oh, she's getting more attention. And then when it came time for us to do media separately, it was a lot easier because we had that solid foundation to build from.
People didn't see you as two separate entities. It was literally like a package.
Yeah. And people hated that. Like TV people would be just like, no, we only have one microphone, and they would really, really resist. But we were very adamant when we got invited to Spain on a world-class, like 5-star trip. They wanted one of us, and we said, well, we're not coming unless we both can come. And they said, okay, you can both come.
When Puneet suggested, and Mom, would you like to speak to them? I'm like, I don't want one. I want both of them together.
Yeah.
So I was like elated at the idea of, having a conversation with both of you, because I recognize that partnerships, like you said, are so tricky. Like, I've very rarely heard of a partnership which has lasted 4 decades.
Yeah. And the other thing, which is, I think been interesting, not that we've done a ton separate, but throughout our business life and ventures, we've split everything equally. So it wasn't like, okay, who's doing more work? Who's not? That never has come up. It's always been that this is, we're equal partners no matter what. And we each bring different value to the partnership, to the company. And that's been something that I think, in the end, there's no one that I would trust with our business more than Mary Sue. No CEO, no anyone. And there's a trust there that you can't replace, which maybe makes it hard for other people to, jump in. But after this long, there's a safety net there that is incredible.
Beautiful. So, Susan, there must have been like a agreement or a conversation on what do we stand for? What will we not compromise on? Because in my mind, that's a secret sauce which allowed you to, even answer to people.
I mean, we have an amazing lawyer in terms of a legal document, in terms of our partnership.
And I think we talked about it.
Yes.
When you got that big Crisco commercial alone.
Right.
You talked to me about
it. Yeah, but that was because you didn't want to be connected to Crisco.
I didn't mind half the money, though.
So, Mary Sue, I'd love to bring an anecdote. So tell us about this.
Well, I think at every step, we are very communicative and transparent. And, I got an offer to go to Spain. I think you should come. And I'm happy to say no if they don't invite you. And Susan said, yeah, say no if they don't invite me. And I think the Crisco commercial, I remember thinking, I don't really want to sell Crisco very badly.
We had to go audition for it. And it was basically actors that were auditioning.
But you got it.
Yeah, I got it.
Big payment.
Yeah.
And
this was 40 years ago. It was the stupidest thing. It was like flavored oils. It was something we would have been embarrassed about. But
yes, she shared the money with me 50% because the thinking at the time was that both of our hard work had created that opening for somebody. But I will say that as the decades roll along, there have been times when we have done separate things and not shared the money.
Yeah.
But I think it's really a matter of just transparency and talking and, what feels right at the time. In the beginning, we were so hypersensitive to every little thing and not as confident or secure in our own who we each are. So I think as you kind of age and mature and become more savvy, your feelings about those kind of situations start to change a bit.
Right. And I'm guessing it also, again, was spelled out, right?
It kind of came up issue by issue. Wouldn't you say, Suze?
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe when I decided to do street, that might have been a time which in many ways allowed us both to say, okay, we're each going to do things that we want to do. Not that we didn't anyways before, but it sort of allowed us a little bit more of the freedom. And if anything, maybe it strengthened our partnership.
At the time, I had 2 teenage boys that were, in retrospect, fine. But at the time for me, it felt like they were always in crisis. And I didn't feel like I had any time to open a new restaurant. And Susan was so anxious to do it. And I said, go ahead and do it. Those were not easy conversations, though.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, okay, yeah, go ahead and do it. It's like there have to be some parameters, like you said. And that was the one time when we definitely used our business lawyer multiple times to help us figure out the right path forward. And, I think that there were times when my therapist said, why don't you just get out of the partnership? And I'm sure Susan said the same. Yeah. But I think at the time, I just didn't feel like I was ready to give up or walk away from what we'd built over the first 27 years or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have the appetite to do it on my own. And I wanted to hang on to what we had. And also neither of us wanted to buy the other one out. If one of us had the money or an investor or something, that might have changed. I don't know. But neither of us were pursuing that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So a difficult question. Mary Sue, what is it about Susan which would ever make you think, like, if I find somebody to buy me out, I will?
I mean, I can't think of like one thing.
In fact, I would ask you both that question. Like, what is it that ever caused any possible rift in your partnership? What is it about each other which made you uncomfortable?
Well, I would say, I'm sure my rigidity and my kind of sometimes single-mindedness without being able to see some of the bigger picture. I mean, I consider myself a really big picture person for our partnership, but sometimes I get on a course and I think I can be so rigid that it could drive Susan crazy. I also think that Susan is very attracted to chaos and putting out fires. And I'm more the person who would want to make sure that there won't be a fire because I've done all my planning ahead of time. So basically, that's kind of our strengths and our weaknesses at the same time, because I think the chaos is really tiring. And also the constant wanting to get it right before we get there is the recipe for no growth, no movement. It can really stall. It can be very restrictive.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that, Mary Sue. Susan.
Well, I guess, again, I think it's the strength and the weakness is that I think we both care about the people who work for us probably more than anything, but we care in different ways. Mm-hmm. I probably tend to sort of go into that role of being the mother, the therapist, if someone's in need of that they can't pay their rent, if it's someone who I'm really drawn to that I think is loyal, my tendency would be I would trust that we should do it. So I think sometimes, the rigidity was probably something that was frustrating. And I can imagine the opposite for Mary Sue. I feel like I have a really good sense about people and their strength. And so maybe I see past their weakness, and maybe that's a plus or a negative because that's not necessarily the truth. And, and sometimes it can be very disappointing. The other side of that is there are times probably where I thought Mary Sue wasn't trusting of that. And so, it's how do you judge that or value it? And I think just part of our personalities is that do you give someone this kind of a raise or this kind of a raise? Yes. Or, and I think those were disagreements that we both could sort of get stuck on. But again, I think it's the strength and the weakness that helps. Sometimes that's good for us because we get stuck if Mary Sue says no. On the other hand, it's really valuable because it makes us evaluate things in a way that's really important. So I think I would feel like it gets in the way. And other times it's really beneficial.
I think it almost sounds like you're the yin and the yang.
But the beauty of the loyalty and the trust and the lengthy time we've been working together is that you can start to recognize that part of yourself that is deficient, like Susan says, that capacity to be really open and see everybody and remember their names. And I mean, I think you get to see that little bit of a deficiency and try to work on that in yourself because, you know, of course, being a partnership, we've been able to really capitalize on each other's strengths. But we've also, you know, had the opportunity to look at things that I'm doing outside of work or like in our nonprofit work, which we do pretty much separately. For me to think, oh, I need to be more like Susan in this instance because I can tell this employee I'm fed up with them and I'm ready to just tell them to go, you know, to the moon. And on the other hand, I just need to like channel Susan for a minute.
I love that. I'm sure it'll give so much value to, you know, the listeners and potential partners. And the follow-up question which comes to my mind is that how would you then resolve these thoughts? Because that's what creates misunderstandings. So which one of you would avoid or address?
I mean, I think something that maybe we've just learned is that there are these things that are more important to Mary Sue, and there's things that are more important to me than Mary Sue. And even if we disagree on those, I think we both have a sense of what that is. And I think there's compromise there that we've been able to navigate and be able to, you know, back down if it's something that I feel is really important to Mary Sue. It's just not worth to fight it. You know, it's compromise.
Yeah. One great example of that is very, very early on, like 4 years in, we were getting ready to open our big city restaurant. And we had partners who were very artistic and we have all these big decisions to make. One was about the plateware, the china, and they wanted to do these really bright colors, sort of like fiesta, you know, a cobalt blue and a bright yellow and orange and minty green. And I was like, oh my God, no, we cannot serve my artistic food on those colored plates. And we had a huge fight about it in a group setting. And I was just like really unhappy. And, you know, the crazy thing is I let go finally because I was way outnumbered, but that was one of the most beautiful parts of the restaurant. It lit the restaurant on fire because there was no art on the walls. There were beautiful red chairs and white tablecloths, and then these amazing looking plates. And we had 4 little tiny colored plates inside of another plate that had fennel seeds, chili flakes, freshly ground pepper, and salt. So people could, you know, of course our food didn't need any more seasoning, but it was just a statement. And, you know, I look back at that argument and I think, wow, am I glad I lost that one?
So what do you think crossed your mind that time, Mary Sue? Did you just compromise or did you sort of change your perspective?
It took me, you know, a couple of years to change my perspective until it all played out when I was like, oh my gosh, I was so wrong. I just compromised because I knew I wasn't going to win. You know, we already had spent way too many hours talking about it.
But what's really interesting, it's, you know, our sensibility about design and the way our restaurants should look is very, very similar in many ways, you know. And so when we're opening a new restaurant, I think we both sort of try to push it to be more something that sort of speaks to us and who we are. And I know she's going to say the exact same thing. So, I mean, we're willing to sort of compromise a bit with the team, which we have now in the last, 10 years, which is fine. But it is an interesting thing, which as much as we want to let them have power, keeps our team somewhat in sync with, it has to speak of who we are if we're going to be connected to it.
Definitely. So let's backtrack a little bit. Love to know what really inspired you or sort of drove you to get into culinary.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this drove me. I mean, my mom was a fantastic cook. And, even if it was the simplest thing, like, she'd make her own Thousand Island, French dressing, Italian vinaigrette. She'd make a salad really delicious. And whether it was lasagna or icebox cakes or whatever, had really good flavors. And then I think my first little job was in a cafeteria in Toledo. And I loved the energy of that. But then I never thought about it really again. I didn't think of it at that point as a career because, again, I was immersed in Ayn Rand. I for sure knew I was career driven. And I was sort of rebellious with my parents. And I had dropped out of college. And then I was back in college. And then I got a job when I was in college in kitchens. And that's, I think, where then I really sort of fell in love with the energy of kitchens, whether it was the dishwasher, the pot station, work doing prep. I felt like this was where I should be compared to me studying economics and studying business, maybe being a tennis pro. And then once I got into the kitchen, I could be in there all day long and never think about it. I can be in a kitchen, from 7 a.m. until 11 p.m. And I still find myself very passionate about that part of our business.
Interesting. And Mary Sue?
Same. I had a great cook for a mom. That doesn't explain why Susan's siblings and my siblings don't cook very well, really. But we both had great culinary passionate mothers. And then I really hated high school. I wanted to get as far away from my mom as possible. At 16, I met this professional chef who was a friend of my older sister's in Chicago who cooked up dinner in like no time flat for us. And he had gone to chef school on the south side of Chicago. And that very night, I said to my sister, I want to do that. I want to go to chef school. Went back and I graduated from high school in 3 years instead of 4 and moved to Chicago, got an apartment. I worked in that gentleman's bakery for the first year while I was on a waiting list to get in to the Washburne Trade School, which I did. And I fell in love with it just immediately. I had also worked in a donut shop and a pizza place in high school. And I had, definitely loved that energy. At the time, there were plumbers and auto mechanics and all kinds of trades that were very much the working class people. And becoming a chef was not sexy. There was Julia Child, but nothing else really. So it was a lot of hard work. And, you worked your butt off all the time. But there were, chefs
and it was physical
chefs and line cooks and, people who were working their way up from dishwasher to garde manger. So I just felt like this was the perfect thing for me to do and never really looked back.
Yeah, looks like you found your North Star much faster because Ayn Rand wasn't on your radar.
Although Susan did immediately introduce me to Ayn Rand the day I met her. And I remember reading that book in the bathtub one night, and I stayed in the tub all night long. I just kept putting more hot water in because I had to finish it. It was huge.
Shifting gears a little bit, Mary Sue, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced early on? Started with one restaurant, you were still learning, you didn't have business degrees.
Oh, yeah. In the chef school I went to, you learn how to cook. We never sat down in a classroom setting and looked at a P&L, nothing, not about inventory, not about just how to cook. So we've had to learn so many things just by the seat of our pants. And there have been lots of moments. We bought our partners out. We had big earthquake, fires. We had a huge riot in Los Angeles. This was like 92, 93, 94. And we had 2 restaurants and we were hemorrhaging money and didn't have a big cushion at all. And there was nowhere to turn. There wasn't a continuing education kind of program that you could go to and say, I'm going to continue getting better at running my culinary business. It was very difficult. And Susan, being Susan, friends with everybody and remembers everybody. We had met a guy named Rich Melman at an awards ceremony when Susan and I were getting our James Beard Award, and he was getting an award. And the three of us all ended up at the bar after we'd gotten our awards, like, okay, let's get a drink. And he said, oh, if you ever need anything, call me. And of course, I had forgotten about him, but Susan reached out to Rich and said, we're going to have to go to bankruptcy because things are so bad. And he immediately said, I'm going to send 2 guys out to your company. They're going to spend 72 hours with you. You have to block out the time and go through everything with them, P&Ls and everything, so we can make some suggestions. And they were amazing. And it was a huge eye opener for me to realize that asking for help comes from such a place of power rather than a place of weakness. And if you don't ask for help, you're just stupid. And, especially in a business like ours, independent restaurants are like silos. You get into them and you just start working your butt off and you don't come up for air. So that was a huge, for me, breakthrough. Okay, now we're going to use Susan's system for every time we are negotiating a lease or, talking to a bank about a loan or, all those things that we had to learn on the job. We had the confidence to go out and just ask people, what would you do if you were me? Here's the landscape of what I'm trying to make a decision on.
So you created your own business management degree through your network and your supporters.
Yeah, we reach out to people. Sometimes it drives like our lawyer crazy, but we have a great lawyer we have had for many years who's very smart, but just in terms of people in our business, we've just always done that and never hesitated. And people are so generous with their, help, which is part of why I think we are that way with other people who reach out to us. People might think are your direct competitors, but, it isn't that. The stronger everybody is, the better. I was just saying this to Yancey, our regional manager in Vegas, is that, the place that we just opened, our quick casual drive-through, if that other little place right next to us does great, it's better for us because people that are there eating are going to see us and they're going to come over and try us. And so it's great to have someone do great who's next to you. But I want to say, Mary Sue, having not had that college degree, is amazing. She's like so smart, understanding of numbers and understanding the detail necessary to really be able to evaluate things. I don't find that there's that many people in our world that are able to do it. Had she gone to college, she probably never would have ended up in this business.
That's for sure.
She would have probably been a lawyer or a scientist or something very different because her mind functions really amazing in that way.
I just want to add that, that breakthrough about how to use your community and your network to help you solve problems is a huge part of Regarding Her, the nonprofit that me and 8 other women in Los Angeles County founded in 2020. And it's very powerful network of women who are helping other entrepreneurs in food and beverage. And I love the fact that we started it really small in Los Angeles, very local and deep roots in the community so that it could have a lot of impact. And we're going to be taking it around the country. We have a beta test going on in DC with a community there. I want to turbocharge the careers of women chefs and restaurateurs and achieve gender parity in our industry at some point. It'll be long after I'm dead, but at least it will have started.
I love it. And that's another reason why you're part of Atlanta Diaries. So can't thank you enough for it. Given your shared passion for cooking, how did you then divide responsibilities within the partnership?
It's so interesting because in the beginning, we both did everything, every single thing. One of us would do the produce order and the other one would check it and change it and vice versa. I think We both love to cook. I really love to touch food, to chop things, to, taste things. My husband's been on a fast for the last 2 weeks, so I'm only cooking for myself. I still make something really special for myself. But we did a lot of the dividing of the responsibilities kind of without talking about it. I think a lot of the way we've grown our partnership has been kind of organic, and it happens without us really like setting in stone who's going to do what. But we're drawn to different parts of the kitchen. Susan wants to be on the hot line in the middle of the fray. I want to be in pastries or making sure all of that prep is done on time and in the right way and everything tastes, exactly perfect. And now that we look back 44 years later, we can see like, wow, this is what Susan does and this is what Mary Sue does. But it was never something we articulated.
Susan, would you like to add something to this?
Yeah. I mean, I've said it half kidding, but not really, is that my least favorite part of the restaurant business are meetings. I'm drawn to being in the kitchen, motivating the team, talking with customers, sort of that relationship. I think there's big value in having our team feel like we're hands-on and having customers, feel that it's not just Susan and Mary Sue opening up a restaurant in Palm Springs and then they're not around because they're celebrity chefs. I do think it, in terms of the people who work for us, that it has big value. In terms of whether the restaurant succeeds or not, I have no idea. I mean, when we were opening Aspie in the beginning, at the end of the night, I'd be doing the pots with the dishwasher, not because they wouldn't have gotten it done, but so that they don't feel they're just working for the boss or whatever.
Yeah, that's interesting. So clearly there's been a journey where you've sort of professionalized it, let go. So how did that play out?
I think what we have done is, like I think I said earlier on, is do the things that we've been most passionate about. So we both do a lot of nonprofit work. Of course, that is what it is. That sort of fulfills a different part of our desires. But, we've written cookbooks, we've had radio shows, we've done TV. And so our growth in our careers has been very sort of across the board doing many things. It hasn't been about creating a company where we've expanded across the country. I think our team has some desire to do that. And Mary Sue and I are willing to risk a certain amount if they can make that happen. And I think we'd be excited about it. But whether it can or not, we don't know.
To provide a little bit of context, I guess, pre-pandemic, we were both working probably at least 30 or 40 hours a week in the restaurants or on the restaurants.
Right.
We had been talking for 10 years about letting go and building a team that could handle the restaurants. My kids don't have any interest in running restaurants. Susan doesn't have children. And at a certain point, you look at the whole package and you think, well, when I have X amount of money, I don't need to do this anymore. I might want to, take flower arranging classes or whatever. When the pandemic hit, that shook us to the core because, there was a moment when we thought, gosh, are restaurants even going to reopen ever? And are we ever going to be viable? And there's a lot of hangover from the pandemic in our industry that is we're still battling at all of our places. But the team really stepped up and we are working through sort of a 10-year plan where we'll work less and less and less, and they'll work more and more and more, and we'll try to not get in their way, but also to guide them. It's a process. I will say it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to watch people fail with your little baby, but in a way they need to have that opportunity to fail. And you have to keep reminding yourself there's certain things that you can only learn by doing. And no matter how many people tell you, you may not be able to get it through your head until you've done it. So I think we're working on that process, and it's been exciting, and we have a great team, and they do really great work at so many levels. We're at about, I'd say, 300 employees. We're probably doing, I want to say, over 20 million a year in sales, at least, maybe 23. We have a catering company, a contract meal business, SOCALO, Border Grill Las Vegas, the stadiums, Border Grill LAX, Alice B.
One of my favorite topics is culture. So how does the word culture resonate with you? Were you intentional about building brand? Do all the 300 people across the restaurants understand that you're part of one big brand? How do you ensure that they're all talking the same language?
25 years ago or so, we kind of did the exercise of what is our culture, and it's in our employee manual. We love to educate ourselves, our team, our customers about things like sustainable seafood and, where things come from and why. We always considered the dining experience in one of our restaurants to be more than just eating, but also, being delighted and kind of nourished with more than just food, but like that hospitality, that warm hug, but also something new that you've never tasted or never heard about or didn't realize. And so those are kind of some of the pillars.
But also, I think we've really stressed with every new restaurant opening, and I think we've done a really good job of it, which is how we treat, whether it's the dishwasher, the general manager, the CEO, that everybody is treated respectfully. We don't yell in our kitchens. We're there to work hard, but to have fun, to respect each other. And also same thing with the customers that, if a customer wants a steak, well done, no salt, make it, and so I think that's the culture, which is like, you treat people respectfully. If you need to communicate that there's an issue, you do it confidentially and try to help people to learn and grow. And so that's a really important part of like the customers should feel that you're informed but that you're having a good time and want them to have a great time and that it's part of you're inviting them into our home.
Awesome. So what motivated your decision to introduce eclectic dishes?
It was so long ago. Our training was all in French kitchens. And I think I personally, the only French food I really, really was drawn to was sort of the country French dishes, which were much more earthy and, than fancy French. But certainly for me, my first visit to India was like in 83. And that completely changed where my passions were. Certainly the Indian kitchen, it began there, but I think it began with the use of spices and flavors. So it just put a different perspective on, ingredients that you could make really delicious food with. Mary Sue went to Thailand and then brought back those. And all of a sudden, the things that we were drawn to were more and more away from the French kitchen and more towards, well, why wouldn't we do a great Thai dish and a great Indian dish? And then, Japan. And then those were then the dishes that we were drawn to. And maybe it even started a little bit at Le Perroquet.
Yes.
It was more nouvelle cuisine, but it would be things like an interesting moussaka, and so I think we just were free enough to just do what we wanted to do.
And we were lucky in the timing because there wasn't anybody calling, cultural appropriation. We also were very much excited about paying homage to, the Mexican aunts and uncles and mothers and grandmothers of all of our employees who brought their family recipes in, and to really like when we go to Mexico and really get into people's homes and cook with them, we would name a dish Eulalia's chips after one of our employees' aunties. And I think we really wanted to try to introduce conservative, maybe a little bit like hesitant white people to this great food at City Restaurant. And you could have so many different kinds. And then we really opened the first Border Grill as a kind of a throwaway afterthought. We still had the lease on this tiny little 900 square foot restaurant with, 9 bar stools and 7 or 8 tables. And we were either going to do a really good hamburger joint with homemade buns and specially ground meat, or a Japanese noodle shop, or a taco joint. And we just kind of decided on tacos because that's what we used to love to get for staff meal, and it would be close by and we could serve our staff. But it exploded. It took off so well.
And we were committed to do absolute, it had to be an authentic Mexican dish or an authentic Indian dish. And what we realized when we took our first trip to Mexico with one of our cooks, family, was that our training in French kitchens helped us in many ways improve, because a home cook is a home cook. It doesn't matter if you're a home cook in Mexico or India, but you may not know that if you take a pork loin versus a pork shoulder and you braise a pork shoulder, you're going to have a juicier piece of meat. So I think just because someone's from Mexico or just because they're from India doesn't mean that they're a great cook. So we felt very respectful, like Mary Sue said, of those cuisines, but doing it exactly how we are taught. And if there was a technique that, we knew from our French training that we could incorporate to make the dish even better, that's where we shifted it, not the style or not the ingredients. It took us many years to let some of our chefs used a achiote, but used it in a butter sauce or something, just something that wasn't very traditional.
So you went all out to understand their story, their source, their style. Any anecdotes or, I'd love to hear some stories around.
I remember after Susan went to India, she came back and she was so interested in doing it exactly like they did it in India. And literally she was sitting out there in the back of the restaurant, peeling cardamom pods and toasting the seeds. And I was like, Susan, I know they have a lot of people in India, but we can't afford the labor to do this. We've got to buy them already peeled.
Do you remember the dish, Susan?
Yeah, the potato bhajia. That's still one of my absolute favorite dishes. We just did an event at the center. I gave him the recipe for the potato bhajia, and it was like,
with the curry neem leaves. I have a fresh neem tree in my backyard that I love it so much.
Yeah, we did chickpea fritters with, chana, and then we did all sorts of vegetarian plates and,
So I was so inspired by what Susan came home with that my uncle was going to be in Bangkok for 6 months. And I asked him to help me find like a little stage and a short apprenticeship for 3 or 4 weeks. So I went to Bangkok and I worked in a hotel with a woman, and she didn't speak a word of English. I didn't speak a word of Thai, but I was in her kitchen every day for 8 or 9 hours for the entire 3 weeks. And she taught me so much. But the dish that I really fell in love with was on the corner as I would walk around the neighborhood, a man with no legs. He just would sit on the corner and he had a big, huge mortar and pestle, and he would make the Thai papaya salad with the crushed chilies and peanuts and dry shrimp. And I came back, and of course, I didn't even know where you could get green papaya. I didn't even think it was something that we could ever have. And I didn't even know for sure when I was eating it what it was. So I decided we do have really beautiful melons. So we would do the Thai melon salad, which was to have that same dressing on 3 stripes of diced, not shredded, but diced watermelon, cantaloupe, and honeydew. And that was a huge seller on the menu for many, many, many years. And every time I would put one of those plates in the window, I would think about that guy on the corner. After he would make it, he'd put it in a little baggie and hand it to me.
Every dish is a story in its own right. So I'm just wondering, how do you share this with your customers, or how do you share it with your team members? Because that's what is standing out for me even as culture.
Yeah. In the beginning, we certainly, I think, told the stories and our experiences. And I think that was really valuable for people to hear. We would be interviewed. We would talk about our experiences. And, we put a tandoori oven in City Restaurant. We bought the tandoori oven from a Indian man who owned a hotel downtown. And Mary Sue and I fired it ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
We shopped in all the markets and relationships with people in the Thai market, the Indian markets. And we expressed that to our team because they saw these ingredients they would never see.
And I think that's what made City Restaurant a really pivotal kind of moment in our careers. That's when we got the James Beard Award in 86. And I think, or it was 85, I think. And I think it was one of those things that can never be reproduced. And we were in our 20s and we were unstoppable. And we would put any amount of effort and time and energy towards creating that story and that beautiful dish. I don't think it's something that, is sustainable for a terribly long time, but it still kind of informs our teams because everybody who gets hired, they watch this video of the opening of our restaurant, the first, which was filmed over 9 months. And I look like a teenage boy. I look like one of my sons. And Susan looks like a little high schooler. In any case, that is still part of the culture. It's never going to be like the 80s in Los Angeles when food was exploding and we were spending 18 hours a day in the restaurant and absolutely loving every minute of it.
And that's the big question and challenge as, our team grows is if our name is connected to it, how do we make sure that culture stays very important and part of the company, and that's, I think, something that's crucial for both of us to feel okay about growth is that continues like that and the communication continues. So, it's interesting.
It wouldn't do justice to this conversation if I don't talk to you about your philanthropic journey. So I'd love to, spend a few minutes to understand, Susan, what's the cause you are most passionate about, and even you, Mary Sue?
I think giving back has been something for both of us that's been very important. I remember when I was really young, like going with my mom and she was volunteering at this nursing home in Toledo. And I always saw my dad talking to people like someone wanted him to talk to someone about helping them get a job. Just there was something about that stuck with me. Whether it was American Cancer Society or Kidney Foundation. We did events which cost the company a lot of money because you're bringing staff and bringing food. But it was something that I felt like this is our community who supports us. We need to support the community.
Wow.
And we need to have our team. I loved having young kids that work for us see the importance, listen to someone speaking and get moved to think about maybe down the road when they have the ability, even if it's not writing a check, to be able to participate in a way that can raise way more money than writing a check. And we still do a bunch of those things. But, I wanted to be involved with things in a bigger way that were very important to me, that had very closely connected roots for where I would put more of my energy. And so I've been on the board of the Scleroderma Research Foundation for 30 years, because my best friend from college started this organization because she was diagnosed with scleroderma. And I'm still on the board and we still do events to raise money for that. And there's the Los Angeles LGBT Center, which I'm blown away to be on the board of because the work, I learned so much, I meet so many people, and the work is mind-boggling to me. So I think it's the most rewarding part of what we do in many ways. And it's sort of connected to how I feel about our staff and the people who work for us. So it's sort of all connected in that way.
That was a beautiful summary to the entire why of your philanthropic journey, Susan. Mary Sue.
Yes, I didn't grow up the way Susan did. My mom was probably a single mom. She was probably more on the receiving end of support than on the giving end. But I think I learned a lot from Susan, and I kind of followed her lead in a lot of ways. And it started with the Scleroderma Research Foundation and closing the restaurant in order to do fundraisers for a cause that Susan was so passionate about, and seeing the magic that happens and the relationships that get formed. And then I know I was on the board of the Share Our Strength, No Kid Hungry for about 20 years. And we did our first event with them in 87. I think also, having an organization that could take our talents and amplify the impact was exciting to me. And also, as we gained in notoriety, it felt like our mission and our responsibility to use our platforms to be able to make the world a better place and leave it better for the next generation. Of course, we kind of failed at that at the moment anyway. But, we got into the Monterey Bay Aquarium with sustainable seafood, and that opened more doors to other kinds of conscientious sourcing and gave us things to talk to our customers about and get them excited about. I think I learned so much on the board of Share Our Strength. There were people on that board, like the CEO of Timberland Shoes. I learned things that I could bring back to my company that I could have never learned of anywhere else. So I always say that I always get so much more back than I give.
Yeah.
It's literally tenfold what I get. And I give a lot. Susan does too. I mean, many hours every week we are giving for free to these nonprofit organizations like Regarding Her and Share Our Strength and the LGBT Center. But we get so much back in return. I see the value every single day.
Beautiful. With the wisdom of hindsight, if you had to revisit any part of your journey, your collaboration or the business, or if you had to say something to your younger selves, what would you say?
Not to put up such a fuss over those colored plates. It's hard because it's about the journey. And you're never going to avoid those painful passages. You're just going to have them. I guess I would say that to my younger self is don't be afraid of conflict and butting heads, and don't be afraid of those uncomfortable moments and those struggles, because they're going to be there and they will make you stronger, and you have to trust in the journey. It's going to all turn out the way it's supposed to turn out.
Beautiful. Susan?
I don't know. I can't really say that I have regrets. Maybe the regret would be that there's not enough hours in the day. There's certainly things that I feel like I've given up, but the reason is because I feel like I'm so passionate about my work. So that has taken away time that Liz and I had to share together, or time to, develop friendships, not even develop them, but to be able to sort of grow those, because my focus has been so there. But if you love both, how do you balance it more? One thing I could say is that we moved Liz's mom out to LA about 15 years ago. And maybe that would be the one thing I could say, that in all the years as my parents were getting older, I would see them once or twice a year, but maybe in hindsight, I would have said, you know what, take 2 days off and go see them. Because now I've seen like the amount of time she's able to have with her mother as she's aged that I didn't have. My parents died, at 83, but that was right in the middle of our careers. But still, I could have figured out how to go there a few more times and had more time with them. And, now I'm trying to do it a bit more with my brother and sister, but it's not as hard to have time now. So maybe that's what I would say. You don't have to not stay focused, but figure out how to make sure you're, sort of valuing all parts of your life.
Creating that happy medium. Yeah. Thank you very much, Susan and Mary Sue. This was absolutely amazing.
Great. You've been fantastic. I'm so looking forward to having other people hear it.
And so thoughtful and a pleasure, real pleasure, Edma. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I hope and look forward to coming and eating in one of your restaurants.
And let us know.
Yes.
I definitely will. I'll take the liberty of saying they're my Flantas. Thank you for being a part of this incredible journey with Atlanta Diaries. I have had the privilege of hosting guests who courageously shared their most vulnerable selves with me. And even if only a small segment of these conversations can champion the journey of one person, it will be worth each and every moment. And together, we know we can create an even greater impact. So I do have a humble request for you. If you found value in these episodes, please consider sharing the podcast with your friends, family, and on your social media. I would also love to hear your thoughts and will really appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review or rating. See you next week for another inspiring journey on Atlanta Diaries.